Hi everyone, and welcome back. We are joined today by Fyodor Lukyanov, a research professor at the Higher School of Economics in Moscow, also the editor-in-chief of Russia and Global Affairs. He also been the chairman of the Presidium of the Council on Foreign and Defense Policy of Russia, and also a director at the Valdai Discussion Club, where he every year interviews President Putin. So it's good to see you again.
Hello.
So you recently authored an article about the weakening of the G7 political system. That would be the countries of United States, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Italy, Japan, and Canada. Now, key commonalities that they all seem to going through some political crisis, and it's still too early to say if they will be able to pull through. But what is your diagnosis? What is happening within these countries?
First of all, to be fair, I must say that this is a crisis, or at least a period of instability and tests of stability for all countries in the world. There's no difference between G7 and all the rest. The question, because of pretty unprecedented level of turbulence. Why I think unprecedented? Because the combination of factors which contribute to this turbulence is very unique. We have changes in all spheres, starting from political, military, geopolitical, and then you name it, social, technological, cultural, whatever, ideological. So everywhere we see something happening, and combined, they create this new level of turbulence. And the specificity and the most troublesome element of it is that we cannot predict how this combination will impact the future development. So it's simply impossible to calculate yet, at least for political scientists and even political leaders. So everybody has to be very cautious, to test ground, and to try to understand what to do next. Next means next step, literally. And in this situation, what I try to say in this commentary you mentioned, the question is how much the states are prepared to react. And here we see the situation when democratic countries like G7 powers and many others, traditionally they were seen as more resilient because of flexibility, because of capacity to change domestic constellation, to adapt the political environment to the social expectations, to the challenges coming from within and without, and so on. And that used to be true because less democratic, more authoritarian, more centralized systems frequently could not react in a proper way to these challenges coming. But this time, this period, we have a slightly different situation, and we see that countries, especially in the European Union, so I particularly see signs of that inside the European Union, simply are unable to respond to all those challenges coming. Why? Because this very unpredictable environment actually requires very high degree of adaptability, to capacity to change situation, change policies, change course in order to react to all the time new factors coming from the outside and from the inside. And this is the new situation. We see both at the same time. when it comes to states, sovereign states, be it so to say less democratic and more authoritarian, as China, for example, Russia, whatever you might assess it, the state has capacity to take sovereign decisions, to change policy, to review what is being done in response to those challenges. In democratic countries, but sovereign states like the United States, we see the same. It might be more successful, less successful everywhere, but at least when those powers, those states, those authorities see that something doesn't work, they can change it. In the European Union, as we know, it works in a different way. It's not a state. It's a combination, it's a community of very much different countries with completely different interests, actually, with very different perceptions of threats and problems, and so on. You name it, the differences are very big. But at the same time, there is no country, no state inside the European Union which can take sovereign decisions without coordinating them with all the rest of the community. And here, from my point of view, here comes the trouble, because in this new situation, it worked pretty well before. It doesn't work now, because those countries, they simply cannot do what should be done in order to address all those challenges. And the even worse, that there is no way how to get out from that, because the whole system has been created to formulate common response. And common response now, from my point of view, is simply impossible.
Do you see this also in terms of the, I guess, the conflict now over Ukraine? Because what often perplexes me is I can understand kind of the position of all the main actors. I can understand why Russia can't accept, NATO's incursion into Ukraine. I can understand why Ukraine would, fight for its defense. I can understand why the United States would seek to weaken an adversary, but now drop the failed project onto the Europeans. The only actor I have a difficulty understanding at the moment is Europe. That is, the conflict is not going their way, but there's no course correction. They really want to be part of the negotiations, so they keep asking Trump, but they can't pick up a phone to call Russia. They see this economic decline and deindustrialization, but they continue to make a decision which only increases the problem. So it's very frustrating to watch that there's no process in terms of identifying the problem and looking for how to resolve it. And I guess what was always good about the EU, not always, but in the 90s and 2000s, was it was able to use this collective bargaining power to get the best economic deals for its member states, to extract some political power due to the asymmetrical interdependence with their partner states, and they could have some independence from the United States. In other words, a pooling of sovereignty. It served national interests despite undermining some sovereignty on the national level. But something obviously has gone off the rails. I'm not sure if it's the centralization of power or linking all policies to values, which means, well, in both cases, you can't really have any effective opposition or course correction. But how do you explain this, though? Because as you mentioned, it's going on in all spheres: security issues, military, political. But there's a problem with how to handle opposition. It's effectively delegitimized across many countries, which makes democracy, the peaceful handover of power, a key problem. But also cultural, as you said, and it's like all these problems just mounting, and there doesn't seem to be anything, any action taken. What is it that is so? Well, why is it that the European Union itself has this difficult? Well, is the problem the European Union, or are there other problems at work here?
There are many sayings subscribed to Winston Churchill. I'm not sure he said everything what is being subscribed, but anyway, And there is his aphorism, whatever brilliant the strategy, it's worth to check the results from time to time. And I think that's exactly what would be needed for the European Union, because you mentioned course correction. I think it's a key notion today for all, for everybody. I would not say I'm absolutely happy about how my country is making corrections in its course from time to time, but at least they happen. Those corrections, not as efficiently as I would desire, but anyway. In case of the European Union, I think the problem is that exactly what you said, that there is no way to make course correction without profound change of the structure of the institutions, of how this union is functioning. Because the main problem is not the fact that the quality of political leaders today is, as many people suggest, um, um, uh, not as before, so slightly lower class than before. Maybe, but it's not the key issue. The key issue is that the European Union, in the ideal form, as it was created after the Second World War, then evolved for several decades and reached culmination by the end of 20th, beginning of the 21st century, was created and especially recreated after the end of the Cold War as the prototype of the liberal world order, as an absolutely new kind of international organization, even more than international organization, as a proto state on the level of supranational unification. And inside this liberal world order, as long as it was dominating the whole international system, practically, or at least ideally, it was a big advantage for the European Union to be the case to watch how it can work, especially given the fact that the military and geopolitical situation was extremely advantageous for the West in general, and the European Union in particular. United States kept patronage in the area of security. Russia delivered cheap energy. China delivered cheap labor and cheap goods, and that was brilliant. But it could exist, from my point of view, only inside this very unique constellation of international factors, this liberal world order, or as Western politicians started to call it later on, rules-based order, was an exception. So it was not as the international system, as international relations used to work for centuries. And I would dare to say it will not be back again anytime soon, maybe never. And in this new situation, when all countries should rely on themselves and use own opportunities to adapt to all those new challenges, all advantages of the European integration now turns into disadvantages. And that's it. That's why change, of course, correction, of course, isn't possible, because you cannot correct course of Germany or Portugal or Sweden or Luxembourg or Slovenia without changing the whole architecture of the Union. And if you start change, then it will be something completely different. It will be not the Union and not the integration people know from the past. And that's why I believe that the European Union is in a very deep trouble. Unlike many other countries, including United States or even Canada, we cannot claim that Canada's sovereignty is limited as well, but that not but it's still the sovereign state. Or it might sound very paradoxical and maybe crazy, but looking back into 2016, when Brits voted for Brexit, or exit from the European Union, at that time it looked from the outside as a complete craziness, complete accident. No one calculated results and so on. But even at that time, I thought it was just my personal consideration. I thought that we don't know how the European integration will develop, and maybe after several years, some people would claim that this very stupid and very unfortunate decision for Britain was actually an escape from the trap which European integration would march in during this. Now, I don't know whether it can be said or not, but at least I think that UK have broader space for correction than the European Union.
Yeah, well, it's hard for me to see the EU's role in the new world, though, because when we look at world order, we usually look at two components: the distribution of power and the legitimacy of how actors work. But if you look at Europe over the past 80 years since World War II, we had, under the bipolar system, it was easy, two centers of power. We had the two competing ideologies. So in the West, we would be under US leadership, but committed to capitalism, liberal democracy. So it's very organized in that sense, clearly delineated. And then, of course, in a unipolar moment after the Cold War, it's one central power, but still, the US was the only game in town. We redivide the world again as liberal democracies versus authoritarians. And so, again, the world order consists. You have one central power, but now it's almost like a civilizing mission that they have to go out and remake the world in their own image as liberal democracies. But in the multipolar world, it's just a lot of things fall apart, it seems. That is the power distribution, for one. If the United States no longer has Europe as its key priority, indeed, it seems like a distant third now. It doesn't really have that important component. Also, the legitimacy appears to fall apart, and it's hard to see why or how countries different from Spain to Lithuania would have what actually they would have in common. So again, and given that the distribution of power is now, you see the largest countries like China being now non-Western countries, for the first time in centuries, you have a very, very post-hegemonic distribution of power and the ability to dictate the values and essentially the source of legitimacy. All of this collapses. Do you see a changing world order, I guess, and how can the Europeans adjust to a new world order? Because it looks like the Europe as a cohesive unit could only exist under the bipolar or unipolar system. Or is this a too pessimistic view from your perspective?
No, I don't think it's too pessimistic. I think more or less that the European Union and Europe at large anymore are not prepared for a post-hegemony, because Europeans enjoyed all benefits of hegemony, while they didn't experience, until recently, they didn't experience negative sides of hegemony, unlike some other countries and groups of countries. What is, from my point of view, yes, I agree, unfortunately, that the relevance of the European Union in the international politics is disappearing, simply disappearing. And from my point of view, the most dangerous element of this process is that the European Union is trying to imitate the international significance. I think the European leaders consciously or unconsciously understand, they feel this lack of real power and lack of any new capacity in the changing distribution, as you said. But for Europe, which got used to be central to the all international processes and international relations at large for several centuries, it's of course very difficult to accept it. And what we see is an attempt to imitate bold policies. The very recent example is a recognition of Palestine by several countries, including France and members of the European Union. On the one hand, no one can deny that what is happening in the Middle East is absolutely terrible and awful, and we can have any strong views on what Israel is doing. But the question is, what is this move designed for? Will it help Palestinian Authority to strengthen their capacities? Not at all. Will it make pressure on Israel to moderate or to limit their activities there? Not at all, rather the opposite. The result will be that they will just double and push up the efforts to try to complete their job. So what does it mean? It means that the European Union is trying to do things which do not require everything, just saying, just words, without thinking about any kind of consequences which it can have on the next step or the step after the next. Another example, from my point of view, is the coming a reintroduction of sanctions against Iran, which has been initiated by European members of this former nuclear deal, the snapback mechanism. Again, why to do this? What do they expect from this move? Do they expect that Iran will suddenly say, "Okay, come on, we will change everything"? It's stupid. It will not happen, and not the European Union has power to pressure Iran. Not even the United States are very successful in that. And again, from my point of view, that's the worst thing. To be inactive is bad enough for countries which have tradition of being central in the international affairs. But there is a thing which is much worse: to imitate activities which will actually harm the whole process, which will not give anything to the European Union, but will harm the general situation in the Middle East with Iran, and Ukraine is part of those efforts as well.
Yeah, I guess on the Ukraine issue, we see something similar. This idea that they have to do something to assert themselves, but when they make statements such as, the path is still on towards NATO membership, or we're going to send troops during a peace agreement. I mean, all it does is, I guess, achieve the opposite, that they can't be a peace agreement. No, it's, I don't know. I often trace this back to the 90s and 2000s, because during those glory days of the EU and all the neighboring countries would like to join, and everyone had to adjust to their external governance or trade rules. They could rule almost through speeches and legislation, which is why in academia the EU was referred to as a legislative superpower. They just set the rules and make speeches, and others have to adjust to it. But of course, the world has undergone some changes. What does this mean, though, for the European security architecture? Because a lot of the problems we have in Europe, which obviously led to the war in Ukraine, has its root from deeper unresolved issues in the European security order. But the European security order is built up around two pillars, it seems. That is NATO and the European Union. But none of these are standing very strong at the moment. Is this, do you see this as a source of crisis, or is this an opportunity? Because it can permit to address some of the mistakes done in the 90s, such as creating a Europe without the largest country in Europe. I mean, how do you assess what impact this will have, the crisis in the EU and NATO, how it will have on the wider European security order?
Frankly, I don't see any chance at this point to correct any of missteps made before during the euphoric period when NATO countries, United States, European powers believed they had no reason to take into account anybody's views, anybody else's views. I think that at the end of the day, after this terrible conflict, which unfortunately doesn't show any signs of approaching the end phase yet, of course, we will need to address the European security issues again, to revisit it. But what kind of revise it might be? So far, based on the atmosphere in Europe, in Russia, in Eurasia at large, I don't see any appetite for cooperative systems based on cooperative measures in Europe, like something like the Helsinki Accord again, or in this form. Those arrangements belong to the completely different international system. I'm very modest in my expectations. What I would see as a very positive outcome of the ongoing war would be disengagement between Russia and Europe, disengagement in the positive sign, in the positive sense that we are not engaged in military activities against each other either, of course. And this engagement might create some kind of new peaceful coexistence as during the Cold War, but the foundations of it will be completely different, of course. What kind of the West, the rest of the world will face in, say, 5 years' time, 10 years from now, no one knows, because the West, as we knew and as we know still from the Cold War, the first Cold War, the second half of 20th century's Cold War, I think this West has gone together with the post-Cold War situation. It does not mean that the West will disappear. United States and Europe will remain in some kind of symbiosis, of course, but probably based on completely different foundations, especially given the fact that the priorities of the United States, and as consequence, probably priorities of the European Union, forcefully will be moved to the other part of the world. And the Atlantic space, transatlantic space, which will not be the central piece of the international politics, if it will be the case in the future, that would create a completely different situation, which probably, not necessarily, but probably would create better atmosphere, a better spirit for this coexistence between Russia and Europe. I hope so.
Would that be based because that wouldn't be because the transatlantic relationship creates a hard border with Russia, or why do you think it would be easier to have better relations between the Europeans and Russians if the transatlantic partnership would be, I guess, less dominant or dominant in the shaping the international system?
I understand that this view from my side is probably a bit too optimistic, but what I would envisage, the European Union being left much more on its own by the United States to confront Russia will be more realistic about the future, about the perspectives of need to coexist. Because the biggest shift today, from my point of view, is that the Trump administration, and I would dare to guess that the next administration in the United States, whoever will occupy this place, will continue this line, maybe slightly differently rhetorically, but continue the line of encouraging Europe to be more for its own when it comes to the security, in particular in the European area. And if it happens, then we can expect two options. One option, which from my point of view will be optimistic, is that the European Union will try to find different means how to address this new situation, including diplomatic, including some bargaining, compromises with Russia on geopolitical issues, on economic issues, and so on. Of course, it might be another option, which is not at all excluded, that the European Union, feeling this loneliness in front of Russia, will get excessively aggressive and will try to catch up when it comes to military capacity. I don't see yet how Europeans can do it, but I cannot exclude the aspiration. Then it might create a very, very big problem till the brinkmanship of the real big war between Russia and Europe. And it might be the case, which looks very unlikely today, but it might be the case that the United States will not get involved in this war. They will say that, yes, we support our European friends and allies. We can help them with selling them arms and so on. But this is not our problem. This is their problem. We are focused on something else, and please sort it out by yourself. It's very hypothetical. It's very frustrating, but we cannot exclude this scenario either.
My last question, though, is just on the U.S.-Russia relations, because when you talk about the West, obviously the United States is the dominant actor here. How do you see the U.S., I guess, very shifting position in terms of negotiating with Russia? Or again, I'm not sure if it's shifting at all, but is this simply the U.S. looking at a new division of labor, that is, the Europeans should take over the containment and confrontation of Russia? Or do you see this aimed at a wider goal of, I guess, resolving the problems within the European security architecture? And I guess towards this end, do you see any advancements in improving bilateral relations between US and Russia alone, or any hopes of ending the proxy war in Ukraine? There's a lot of questions packed into one, but I guess the overarching is, how do you see the development of the talks between the Americans and the Russians?
First of all, to be frank, I don't see any improvements in relationship between Russia and the United States besides the rhetorical part. Indeed, Trump administration is very much different from what we saw before. This is not because of their different perception of Russia. That's because they see the whole strategy of the United States in the world in a completely different way than the Biden administration, Obama administration, or previous administrations did. When it comes to, and in this picture, Russia is seen, as I feel it, Russia is seen not as a friend, of course, not as a significant partner, but as an important power, as an important force, which should be taken into account and should be deterred and contained, but not only by attempts to push Russia out from any spheres of interest Russia might have. So in this regard, Trump and his people, at least key figures around him, including, from my point of view, Secretary of State Rubio, they see broader space of flexibility in relationship with Russia. Having said that, did we see any changes, any practical changes in the relationship since February, when Trump called Putin for the first time? No. The big change happened in February as well, at this catastrophic meeting between Trump and Zelensky in the White House, when Trump publicly said, being asked by the journalist whether U.S. Is on the Ukrainian side, and Trump said, no, we are not on either on Ukrainian side, we are not on the Russian side, we are mediators. And that was a revolutionary shift, of course, compared to what we saw in previous years. No one in the West could dare to say that he or she or his country or her country was not on the side of Ukraine. In this regard, that was a big shift. Otherwise, I remember those statements by both parts, Russia and the United States, in February, March, that yes, there is a big problem with Ukraine, we should sort it out. But beyond that, we have a broad range of different issues and options how to make our countries big partners. And we can work simultaneously on all tracks, including starting from the very technical and, as it was envisaged at that point, the easiest one to restore functioning of diplomatic institutions, embassies, consulates, and then we can move closer to other issues. And I was very skeptical on that from the beginning, because we know from the extended experience before, minor issues cannot be resolved before the big issues is done. And it's exactly what happened. Without progress on Ukraine, we can not expect anything, be it economic, be it diplomacy, be it functioning of those institutions. It's out of question. As for the Ukrainian issue, I don't believe that Trump and even people around Trump, more experienced in foreign policy, I don't believe that they are keen to create a new security architecture in Europe. Some of people think about that, but in general, it's not in the focus of the U.S. priorities, U.S. interests. What Trump wants to stop military phase of this war. And that's it. And then he can claim that the AIDS conflict I resolved. Now I deserve 3 Nobel Peace Prizes, or 4 of them, I don't know. And that's it. It doesn't work. And now even Trump understands that. But I think that ideally Trump would love to disengage, as he did during his first term with North Korea. After a very, very big celebration start of these negotiations, he saw that it was no chance to agree on anything, and then he just forgot about that. He cannot do the same here, because he engaged too deeply, and the issue is much bigger than Korean Peninsula. But again, I think that we cannot expect any big steps or any progress on the Ukrainian field without profound change of the military situation, be it success on the Russian side or some more successful actions on the Ukrainian side. But the military dynamics will define the rest. Without it, I'm afraid that we will be at the same point a year after today. And again, as I said, the one factor for Ukrainian deal, Ukrainian solution, that's a military situation on the battlefield. Another thing is what will happen around, what will happen in the world, totally disconnected from the Ukrainian issue, be it the Middle East, be it the situation with China, be it a relationship between United States and major partners inside BRICS, inside NATO. All of them are turbulent now. And based on that, we can expect some changes while Ukrainian war will continue. So it's absolutely not what I would like to see in this situation, but I don't expect anything different in the foreseeable future.
No, it does seem that the diplomatic situation has locked itself. I guess, sorry, just one last question. What advice would you give to both the Russian and European leadership, though, in terms of where they're stuck at the moment? I guess possibly the European most, because they've also been, I guess, locked in this position where they can't change course. I mean, looking into history, there's not that much comparison, I guess, but what is it that could be done at this point in time?
I don't think much could be done. The advice to all, be it Russian leadership or leaderships of European countries, NATO, United States as well, would be to understand that the situation is really unprecedented, and the control of escalation might be an illusion, because all strategic thinkers, they speculate and calculate a lot about how to escalate but under control. It was not a very encouraging experience in the past. We knew bad examples of that by all sides, Russia, Soviet Union, United States, and so on. But still, it is part of the strategic thinking that escalation might be mean and it can be controlled. I'm afraid that, as before, but even more now, it is a very dangerous game. So, and that should be said to all parts of this conflict. And as for the European Union, I think the key element of the whole European picture is Germany, of course. What will happen in Germany? And unfortunately, it's another topic which we can discuss some other time. But this imitation of strategic moves, which we mentioned before in the conversation, partially, as it looks like from the outside, partially is an attempt by European governments to distort people from growing problems inside, social problems, economic problems, electoral problems. And we see that in Germany, for example, each next opinion poll demonstrates higher rating for Alternative for Deutschland. And that means that there is a significant domestic trouble in Germany. And from history, we know that Germans are especially bad in course correction. Historically, we know that. And to me, it's quite worrisome.
Yeah, well, very much agree on that. I think, we should have discussed Germany one day, because the shifts which have taken place there has been so dramatic and so fast. So, but we're gonna have to save that for next time. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.